Hello, Claire. Welcome to the Quantum Health Connection podcast. We are so excited to chat with you today. Welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me. Looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Let's start off with your sort of homeopathy story of how you came to be a homeopath. And you've been a homeopath for a long time now. So you started off like a lot of us in a whole nother situation. And like I started off in teaching, so did
Yeah.
Vanessa, and you started off in the corporate world. So how did you get here?
Oh, good question. How did I get here? I feel like it was meant to be, but yes, I started. I did my degree in theatre studies, and
Mm.
then I came out of that thinking, nope, I'm not going into the theatre. I love the course, but I love watching theatre, but I wasn't looking at it as a career option. Was really unsure what I wanted to do and ended up in a sales position in London, very corporate environment. And as much as I enjoyed the job and I worked with lovely people, it just didn't feel right, didn't feel like my soul calling. So I just knew that I wanted to do something else, but I had no idea what that was. And at the time, I was with my boyfriend. I mean, he's no longer my boyfriend, but when we were together, unfortunately, he was diagnosed with cancer. And he was
Mm.
only 23, 24 at the time of diagnosis, so really unusual. And it kind of led me on a path of wanting to understand, like, how could someone of that age get cancer so young? Like, what happened, and and also, like, what am I doing with my life? Why am I doing something I'm not really enjoying that isn't my sole purpose? And why am I wasting time? So it led me on a path of looking into other options. And thankfully, my ex-boyfriend is fine now. He's in remission. He's very well. But we went through the whole trauma of chemotherapy, radiotherapy, multiple hospital visits, all of that. And it really made me question the whole system. And I wanted to understand what had brought him to ill health. So then I started looking into other options. I'd always had a big interest in complementary medicine or alternative healthcare. When I was growing up, we were taken to osteopaths and acupuncturists. So I was kind of familiar with that world, but I wasn't very familiar with homeopathy, I have to say. I think I probably had a bit of arnica growing up. So over time, just doing my own research, I started looking into different options and I came across homeopathy and I thought it sounded really interesting. So I booked myself in to see a homeopath, thinking, my health is fine. We'll just see how it goes. And of course, the questions started, and I was like, oh, yes, I do have really difficult periods. And yes, I am on the pill because I'm trying to heal my acne-ridden skin and keep my periods regular. And, all these things that I'd had been doing to myself in kind of to cover up my symptoms, I didn't realize were having such an impact on me. And so, with the work of the homeopath and the remedies, I just noticed a huge shift in myself, not just from a physical perspective, but like also an emotional, mental perspective as well. And I started to feel like I was becoming more of my true self, my true, like the person that I was meant to be, almost like the person I was when I was younger, but had kind of covered up, or through experiences at school and parenting and all of that kind of stuff that happens to you over the course of your life. And I just
Mm.
felt like I had a real draw towards the homeopathy itself. And I remember the homeopath saying, "Well, are you thinking about studying?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I am, but I'm scared, to quit my job and start
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
studying homeopathy because I wanted to do it full time. I didn't want to be working and studying at the same time." And
Mhm.
she said, "Well, I'm going to give you a remedy to see if it helps." And I remember now it was lycopodium.
Yeah.
And
Confidence.
I I think it was a 10 m. I don't remember exactly. I took a dose of lycopodium, and the next day I was like, right, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to be a homeopath. So that was it. I did exactly that and ended up looking up well, in fact, it was my homeopath that recommended the school that I went to, even though she didn't actually study there. But her view was that I needed to look for a practical form of homeopathy. She said, look,
Mm.
all I'm seeing in this day and age is people with toxicity, people like you've been on the contraceptive pill and antibiotics. I'd taken Roaccutane for my acne. So there'd been all this, drug layer that she felt had been a big part of why I wasn't in this good place. And through that, I came across the College of Practical Homeopathy. And I went there on an open day and I was instantly like, this is my home. I'm supposed to be here.
Oh,
Ellen Kramer's the director. She still is, but she's not doing as much as she was before, but she's director of the college. And I just felt this, yeah, feeling of this is where I'm supposed to be. So
Mm.
I quit my job. Unfortunately, I had 3 months notice, which was kind of painful to pretend that I was loving what I was doing, but secretly I couldn't wait to leave. And yeah, I ended up going straight into full-time studying, and I was just amazed by what I was learning. I felt like I was with the people that I needed to be with. We were all on a similar journey. Everything about it made sense to me, just the way that things were explained about people's histories, about their family histories, about toxicity, about all the different layers that we accumulate. And for me, it just felt like the perfect kind of therapy tool that I wanted to use. I wasn't particularly drawn to doing body work. I felt like counseling for me wasn't enough. And it just felt like something about homeopathy kind of had this perfect blend, that
Mm.
you could listen to people and that you could ask the right questions and you could go on this kind of journey of being a detective and understanding all this stuff about them that could lead you to remedies that would actually promote healing, and that you weren't the one that was the healer, you were the one providing a formula for them in order to heal themselves. So for me, it
Mm.
was just ideal. And yeah, that's basically what happened. I did 2 years full time, and then I graduated, and then I met my husband. And
Mm.
I remember going through the whole rigmarole of what am I doing? How do I get clients? How do I practice? What am I doing? And he was actually a huge support to me. He was like, you've just got to do it. I'll support you. Just get out there. And I just did all sorts of different things to drum up business. I set up an acute homeopathy clinic in a local health food shop. I went to networking like meetings and met other, business people in the area, and even just things like I went to a fitness class and the woman asked if I would write blogs for her newsletter, and we're still in
Mm.
touch as friends to this day. But like it was a fantastic tool for getting my name out there and getting people to understand what homeopathy was. Because really at that time, we're talking like 2008, things for homeopathy weren't actually looking that great. It was a time where there was a real movement towards eradicating homeopathy,
Mm.
suggesting that it wasn't scientific, and there was sense about science and groups like that they were actively targeting homeopaths and other alternative therapists and trying to discredit our names. So it was a tricky time, but what I found is the more I focused on what I was doing and the positive results that I was getting, the less of the skeptics I kind of came across. I think in the early days, there was definitely people that would question what I was doing, and I felt a bit defensive. But over time, I just
Yeah.
don't, I just don't experience that anymore, because
Yeah.
basically it's just not in my energy field. I just have no interest, because it's like, here I am 15 plus years later, still practicing and still getting
Yeah.
results. So yeah.
Well, now there's a resurgence of homeopathy, so you're going to be like, right, you have
Yeah,
this whole new experience with all the
yeah,
new homeopaths coming on board, and that's so
Yeah.
I
amazing. Thank you for sharing
amazing.
your story. I love when you said like when you were young, that the covering up. So there's also the suppression of our soul through various
Mm,
experiences we have. It's not just pharmaceuticals or sometimes
yeah.
educational systems that aren't really honoring of our spirit. It's just like this universal, and that's what you were also experiencing as you were coming into your own, starting your practice, is like they're trying to squash, right, our your efforts, and homeopath's efforts, and it's
Mm,
almost like you know we have to focus on the removing the layers of everything. It's not
mm,
just about the physicality of it, and so yeah, I love that. It's we're coming into more of our own essence of who we are.
yes. And I
Mhm.
think that's the trick, isn't it? Like understanding that adults will come into your practice and they will have layers that they've built that are not just something physical, but also just being bullied at school or told by teachers they're not good enough, or having difficult relationships with their parents, or having an accident and falling and hurting themselves and feeling like, oh, that's too risky, I'm not going to do that again, or an injury that's, yeah, maybe ongoing and chronic. And over time, we build up these layers that we don't realize we're losing that sense of our true self, our true essence. And I think with homeopathy, that's the focus, is really just we're moving back towards a time where excuse me, in our kind of essence, like we were ourselves, and we were able to be who we really are without having all of that, yeah, expectations and societal norms that are put on us. even just like
Mhm.
going into work, I was like, oh, well, I go to university and I do my degree and then I go and get a job and and then I buy a house or whatever the kind of system suggests that we do. But I just remember walking in London towards the tube and thinking, we're all just zombies, like walking towards this tube. I was like, I don't fit in here. I don't like
Yeah.
black. I don't wear any black. Everyone just wears black. I used to think this is not me at all. There's me in my bright pink coat or whatever I
Oh my goodness. Oh, I love that.
yeah, it's a funny kind of time. But in a way, the job that I had, I feel was an important part of my process because I was in a managerial position and I was the youngest manager that they had there in the sales team. So, it was quite a big deal in my early 20s to be managing 11 people. But in a way, what became obvious is where my skills lay was that I was able to listen to people and that they would share stories about difficulties at home and I remember my manager saying, look, we don't care about that. We just need them to be on time for work and reach this target. And I was like, oh no, I'm not here to do that. Like just, oh, it wasn't me at all. But I think that was part of my learning. And also just being able to reach target, like having a business sense behind did help, I'm sure. But yeah,
Yes.
it's just part of that
Yeah,
process.
it's all part of the journey, right? It's all part of the plan of what's supposed to happen for us, right? I mean, even though that maybe wasn't your soul's purpose or calling and you fell into it, it had a purpose at that time to bring you to who you are. I was a teacher, a special ed teacher for 15 years. Right before this, there was a reason for that season. It was a big part of my life. And, there's things now that are coming into my life now that make sense for that. So I think it all connects and it's all important. And I love that you're doing this now, and I love, your story and how you shared it. And I wanted to ask you, listeners are probably like a little bit curious because you said the word practical homeopathy. What does that mean versus classical homeopathy? Like, as you said, you went to a school for practical homeopathy. So share a little bit about that, what that means.
So it's essentially using multiple methods of prescribing. So the idea is that there are different ways you can prescribe remedies for people. One of the most obvious or the most kind of prestigious ways of prescribing is considered classical homeopathy. So a lot of people only want to see a classical homeopath and believe that to be the best form of homeopathy that there is. But it's just one type of homeopathy. So it's great to know how to prescribe in that way, but it doesn't work for everybody, unfortunately. It would be wonderful if it worked for everybody because it means that we'd be living in a world without toxicity and without all these layers and all of these things that we're dealing with. And I think back in Hahnemann's day, that was very, prevalent for those times to use that type of prescribing. But practical homeopathy incorporates other prescriptions that you can do, so combinations, or you could do autopathic methods where you're giving the drugs back in potency. You might do an organ support method. You might do layers method, so you might go through different layers of their life. There's so many different ways of doing it.
Mhm.
And to be honest, I probably don't use all of the methods all of the time, but it's nice to have the options there. Some of them I know more about than others.
Mhm.
Some, like for example, the triad method is quite a nice way I find of prescribing where you give more of a constitutional and acute and a miasmatic together
Mhm.
so that you're kind of covering all bases, especially if you're just starting with somebody new. A lot of the time they use that in Africa because they're
Mhm.
not seeing people for long periods of time because they traveled on foot. So that was where that kind of method was
What did you call that method?
triad.
Triad. Oh, okay. Because I've heard a dual prescribing, and I've been doing that a lot lately, where you give the constitutional and the miasm, but then you're also giving the acute. But I actually did that intuitively for a client just recently, and I was like, I
Yeah.
think you also need euphrasia because he had a lot of allergies, So I was like, you know what, we're going to give the constitutional, we're going to give the miasm, and also use our euphrasia as needed, right? Like, so that's kind of that exactly what you just said. Yeah.
Yeah. I might
Yeah.
do that like Monday, constitutional, Wednesday, acute, Friday, miasmatic, or I might
Yeah.
do the acute daily and then the other
Yep.
two either side as an intercurrent. So, I mean, it's kind of
Yeah.
changeable, but it's a lovely method that
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's really cool. And everybody's individualized. So everybody's gonna need something different, right? Yeah, like the way that
yeah,
we work, right? So I love that. And I
yeah,
agree. Like I think a constitutional is the goal, right? Like I feel like that's the goal is to get the person to that. And like you said, homeopathy helps you be more of yourself. So like hopefully you can get to that goal and like remove all those drug layers, which we're going to talk about, and then get to that. But um, most of the time, people are really sick with all the layers. They don't even realize it. Like you, when you went to see the homeopath, you're like, oh, I'm fine. But then you're like sitting down like, oh, wait a minute. Actually, all of these things actually need support. Like, so we don't even realize it. And we
Oh,
don't even
no.
realize how much all of the drugging or all of the emotional suppression, right? And what that's done to us and how much we need to remove before we like peel back to us. And I think actually now sometimes we spiral back to those layers again, which I've seen in myself and clients as well. So anyway, it's just there's just so much to unwrap in a person.
It's that's what I love about it, that you're always learning. You'll never
Mhm.
be like the expert in everything homeopathic related, because there'll always be some client that comes in and throws everything out the window and you think, right, I've got to start again. Or I mean, I think the biggest thing I learned at college was not so much about the methods or the remedies, it was actually about what is the essence of the case, because
Yeah.
that's what most people miss. They think, oh, they look like this remedy and I probably should give them that. And it's like, but what caused them to get sick? What is the causation here? What is it, something emotional? Is it something they came into contact with? And then you can delve from there. So the idea that we need to learn all of these different remedies isn't actually meaning that we're going to be better at what we do,
Mm-mm.
because it can confuse things. Sometimes it's about understanding what's going on well, it is always about understanding what's going on with the client to start with, and then what do they need? Like, is it they've never been well since an antibiotic? Okay, then you probably need to detox an antibiotic. Is
Hmm.
it that they've never been well since they were abused as a child? Okay, then you're probably going to need remedies around ailments from abuse. So it's like you're looking at what's the essence of the case. And I think people see all these layers and they get confused and they like, oh, but she's also got a sore foot and this. And it's like sometimes you can't deal with everything all at once. Sometimes you can
Mm-mm.
only do, and sometimes you can't go there. Maybe the abuse from childhood is there, but sitting on the top is like severe
Yes.
insomnia, all sorts of other things that are happening that need some attention first, because the nervous system is clearly out of control and isn't able to cope with stress.
Yeah,
So you need to calm the
100%.
nervous system down, and maybe you just do something very gentle to begin with, like a bowel nosode or an
Hmm.
organ support, or yeah, some passiflora or something along those lines, until you can kind of almost allow the nervous system to be more trusting so that it can start to work in the place of trauma. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Totally. It makes a lot of sense. Sometimes you just can't hit it. You can see that like deeper mental emotional cause, and you're like, okay, but the system's not strong enough for that maybe yet, so we can't really hit that in the beginning. So that makes a lot of sense. And I'm starting to use homeopathic detoxes with clients as well to remove the drug layers. But what I find sometimes a lot I do, Claire, is I have to give organ support first, or I have to give maybe like something like that first before delving into that thymus gland. I don't know, something along those lines before I just be like, okay, we're just gonna like jump into this. It depends on the case.
Yeah.
It's again always depending. It's always case dependent on the person and where they're at. So yeah.
Sometimes they don't tell you things. So
Oh, yeah, that
so
too.
you might start with an opening prescription and then they come next time and suddenly all this story comes out and you think, oh, okay, no, this is not what I thought this case was at all. Actually, that's what the case is. But
Yeah.
that's the beauty of the remedies, is that they can open up that chapter that maybe they hadn't wanted to, tell
It's
you about.
such a good point too that you bring up though about like seeing a homeopath, like say someone comes to you or I or Heather, just seeing them one time, it's not enough because you're not going to get everything that you need to know. And you might, there's so, first of all, we talked about there's so many layers, right? But sometimes they're not going to say something or you're not going to see something. And maybe it's the follow-up that has a breakthrough, but maybe it's the fifth follow-up, there's a breakthrough also. So I think it's important to like work with somebody for a long time before you just give up on it as well, because it can take time to really like develop that relationship and have enough safety there for you to share. And like you said, the first homeopathic prescription can help them open things up, and then they will share something with you that they didn't in the first one, right? So,
I have often said that to people, like the follow-up is actually more important than the initial consultation. This is when we
totally.
start really seeing what's happening, and
Yeah.
people will have old symptoms return that they'd
Mm.
completely forgotten about, and old memories come up, and suddenly they have revelations about things, or suddenly they become much more aware of their body. Like, oh, actually, I didn't realize, but I'm actually going to the loo 3 times a day when I thought I was only going once a day, or whatever it might be. So there's always something that, yeah, they start to become more aware of themselves. And I think that's really important, because I think the disconnect is quite tricky. And there are people who are just completely disconnected from their bodies and what's their body's telling them. And so when you can integrate that, then it's like the change happens.
It's
But
interesting because people maybe forget they took things for a reason. Who knows what it is, or they just don't have a good memory, or the suppression is affecting their ability
yeah.
to remember things or be in touch with their bodies. But for our listeners who maybe are wondering, like, what's this drug layer mean? How would you define that, Claire?
So I see it as any form of suppression. So the idea is that when we take a pharmaceutical product, we're wanting to eradicate the symptoms, right? So, for example, you've got a headache, you take a painkiller, the headache goes away, but you haven't actually gone into the causation of the headache. Like maybe the headache was caused by stress, maybe it was dehydration, perhaps it was an injury to your neck. So any of those options could be the causation. So guess what happens? If none of those things are addressed, the headache will come back, and then the painkiller comes in. And so slowly over time, you might suppress something to the point where the headache stops, but then you start getting anger issues because your liver's irritated by the painkiller, and then you're more irritable, and then maybe your skin gets itchy because again the liver governs the skin, so the skin starts to show a rash, and you think, oh, now I've got this rash, I'm going to get steroid cream and I'm going to stick it on this rash. And of course the rash then goes, and you think, great, I've got rid of the rash, but you haven't, and then something else comes up, so it's like this cascade of suppression, but basically you're just chasing symptoms around, which is why you often see that people start with a drug and then end up with a whole myriad of drugs that they're on for something that they don't even remember why. They're usually like, oh, I'm taking this to counteract the effects of that drug, and then this one helps with that, and it's like, what? How did somebody end up in this position? And so that's what we see in homeopathy. It's like usually a cascade of different interventions that over time stop you seeing what the body is actually trying to tell you. And what you end up seeing is side effects from the medications that they've taken. So they come to you and they say, I've got a rash. And you think, oh, I'll treat that with sulfur. Makes it worse. Oh my goodness, why has that happened? Okay, because it's not a sulfur rash. It's a rash from, whatever took place, the painkillers, or for example. But there's always like looking at what's caused what. So the idea is that what I say to people is, because I do a lot of supervision with students, is say, look at the side effects of the medication that somebody is on and see if they match the symptoms that they're coming to you about. Because often drugs.com is great. It has all the side effects, it lists all the little intricate ones, and side effects means effects. Okay, these are what the drugs will do to you potentially. For most people, there'll be some form of side effect, and they can make it look like your natural way of being. But what you need to understand with the patient is, okay, but did you always have headaches, or did you always have a skin rash? When did this start? Because inevitably you find it wasn't a childhood thing. It happened later in life. Oh, but then I took this and then I took that. So then you've got toxicity. And that's really what I'm looking at. So it's like with women, I work predominantly with the pill. And often what I see with women is like gut issues related to the pill. So they
Yeah.
might have had, IBS symptoms start after taking the pill. So often say, when did these IBS symptoms start? Oh, well, this year. And okay, what happened in that year? Oh, well, I went, I did this and I took that. And so you're always looking for essentially a timeline of what's
Mhm.
happened. And then
Mhm.
that's what we're dealing with. Is often it's like, okay, it's not the person, it's the drug, and the drug is causing confusion. And then when you detox the drug, you start to see things more clearly. And maybe then the constitutional remedies start to show themselves. Or maybe another layer comes up that needs addressing. Even if someone's just taken one or two different things, it may be some people have taken a whole cascade. We have like all sorts of interventions from birth now, like babies are receiving vaccinations very young, there's antibiotics in the system, there's all of these things that essentially might need detoxing at some point. I mean, I don't necessarily detox everything, but sometimes if I really feel like it's affecting somebody's health, I will go there. Or I might try indicated remedies first, and inevitably they might aggravate the person or they don't make any difference whatsoever. And then I know, okay, there's
Right.
something that needs
Yeah.
addressing. There's a miasmatic layer maybe, but
Yeah.
often it's drugs.
That's kind of how I do it too. Like I'll start with a constitutional, and if I see nothing shifting, then maybe a miasm, and then I'm like, okay, now I have to dig deeper here because obviously there's something more that's causing the issue. But yeah, there's a lot of drug layers in people. Like even in, you could just take my own case. I mean, the amount of times I've taken antibiotics, antifungals, steroids, vaccinations is kind of like if I sat when I sat and thought about it, like when I first learned about homeopathic detox, I'm like, oh my God, I'd be like detoxing for like a year. Like it was
Yeah.
like if I decided to do all these things, birth control, it's like, wow. Like we don't think about it. We just like take these things willy-nilly, like they're no big deal, like they have no side effect, like they don't cause any suppression to the body. And like you take an antibiotic for, say, a bladder infection, like in my case, which was when I had chronic bladder infections, right? It doesn't actually go away. It just suppresses it and makes it cause deeper issues within you. And it's just like that, the people think like, oh, it just went away. And I'm like, it didn't go away though, actually. Like the rash didn't really just go away. It's just causing something. It's something, the way that the body was trying to express something. And then you were like, shh, let's just put it back inside. Let's just, keep that in. Let's shut it up, basically.
Yeah.
And it's just like that's what I love about homeopathy so much is that people always ask me that question. They're like, wait a minute, but I have an infection. And I'm like, what does that really even mean? Like, it doesn't even mean anything to me anymore, but they can't like wrap their brain around like the biochemical of it. They don't understand the energetics of it. So they're like, oh, we have to like hit this from a biochemical standpoint to actually move the needle when really energy always precedes matter. And it was an energetic issue that started it from the beginning, right? So it's just a whole nother way to look at everything. So yeah.
Well, it's that's the thing, isn't it? It's a completely different dimension. Like it's just a parallel universe to what we see. I mean, that's what I try to explain to people when they're like, well, why does my doctor not work in this way? It's like, but they're working in a completely different way. They are trained. So it's not through fault of their own. It's not like they're trying to do the opposite. It's just all they know. Their options are drugs, and they can't individualize that much because there's only so many antibiotics you can give. And then if one doesn't work, you try the next one. If that one doesn't work. And I've had people with UTIs. I mean, I had one woman, she had so many antibiotics for UTI that she became resistant, and the doctor said, I cannot give you antibiotics anymore. And
Yeah.
that's when she saw me because she was like, I'm desperate, I'm in agony, I don't know what to do. And she responded so well to homeopathy that she actually went on and studied homeopathy. So,
Oh, I love
it's
that
like,
story.
it's just amazing. But
Yeah.
it's just such a shame. I mean, I have another friend who she was on my course actually, and she got into homeopathy by going to see a GP, general practitioner, who was trained in homeopathy and pharmaceuticals. And
Oh, that's
basically,
nice.
yeah, they said, okay, you've got a sinus infection. You can either take Calibic, try that first. That's the homeopathic. And here's antibiotics if that doesn't work as a backup. So she thought, well, what is this? And she took the Calibic, and her sinus infection basically disappeared, but she didn't get recurrent ones. So it wasn't just like it really, it was actually what she needed. And she thought, wow, what is this? And then she basically ended up studying homeopathy from
Yeah,
from
well,
that
because
point
you're
of view.
reducing that susceptibility, right? Well, that's the huge
Yeah,
part. You're shifting the energy so the body doesn't have to keep having those reoccurring things keep coming
yeah.
back again and again. I love those stories. Thanks so much for sharing. That's so beautiful. It's like amazing what the body's capable of when it just gets the right nudges and the right stimulus to like hand it on the right direction, right? In the right trajectory. And then you're not having those effects of, I mean, antibiotics, we know how much they destroy the gut microbiome. It's such a problem. So, and it was interesting that you correlated the birth control with gut before. I like that correlation before. And I don't know, I'm sure you've read Tan Jensen's book of Fighting Fire with Fire. Like that's like, do you look at that or do you look more at the person? Because he will say you have to like birth control. He probably would say, I think the C19 jabs are probably above that now, but he
Mm.
would say birth control was the first thing. Like if somebody had that if you don't remove that, you don't get the endocrine system, like release that chokehold on the endocrine system, then it's not going to flow. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that, since you do work with a lot of hormonal and things like that. That's your like niche, right?
Yes. So
Yeah.
in terms of what I learned at college, we were very focused on detoxing, and we didn't. Think we. I don't remember learning anything about Tom Johnson at the time, but
Mhm.
essentially we would look at what was kind of, yeah, the last thing in the case, and then work
Mhm.
backwards. That was usually what we did. But obviously there were times where, maybe someone took a psychiatric drug and never really been well since then, you might want to target that first because it's kind
Yeah.
of like quite a big part of the case. So
Mhm.
it's sort of dependent again on the individuality. I think it's quite nice that there are methods that people can follow because I think it's nice to have a structure and a way of looking at things. But I also like the fact that with homeopathy, you can be quite flexible and that there isn't always a black and white way of doing things. And I think that's what makes it kind of infuriating to study is that you're like, what potency and how often? And it's like, well, it could be this. You could take it that often. It's like, well, I don't understand. And you can see six different homeopaths and get six different prescriptions, and you can still get results with all of them. It's just the breadth
This
of options are massive.
Very
It's
individualized, right? So tailored to the person. But each of us sees different things or could think about it in a different way too. And I love that can come to
absolutely.
feeling either way. So Claire, you work a lot with women. Your niche, so to speak, is working with women and those
Yeah.
their particular issues. So how did you get into that? And um, you also help women connect to their feminine essence. I'm really, really interested in seeing how you do that through a homeopathic lens.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of how I got into it, I think it's through my own experiences essentially, because that was what I was going through was hormonal issues. I had acne. I also had IBS, which I later found out was caused by the contraceptive pill. And so I just, through my own understanding of what happened to me, I had a real empathy for other women going through similar things. I'd say now what I've noticed is that there are fewer women taking the contraceptive pill. I mean, that's just my kind of clinical experience. I don't know if there's actual stats on that, but I am noticing a shift in women having a more of an understanding around their hormonal health and not wanting to necessarily take any kind of contraceptive. They seem to be much more aware of what the side effects could be, which I think is really important. I think in terms of like the feminine essence, I mean, there's a lot around now. You're seeing more about the idea. I mean, it's like it's about balance, right? Homeopathy is always about restoring balance. And what we see in society is one extreme to another, like, oh, we've got to go all in and then we're all out. And there's never that return to balance. So that now you might see it with people, promoting very specific kind of masculinity, like men are supposed to be in control and doing this, that, and the other. It's like, hold on a minute, can we just have balance in this conversation? Because extremes sells, okay? So that's where the money is. And I think what a lot of women have been brought up with, especially sort of millennials, is that being very masculine in terms of your approach. So successful, driven, money orientated, all of those things, those masculine, which they're not bad things. It's just that we need balance. That a lot of women are more in their masculine than they need to be. And I see that in clinic. They've kind of lost touch with their feminine side, maybe their sexual side, and they're struggling. They're living in a world where they're like, oh, I've got to have all this drive and I need to be on all the time. And it's like we've got to look at things from the perspective that we need both rather than just one or the other. And men the same, they need to have a feminine and a masculine too, and also have balance. And there are good and bad aspects of each of the masculine and feminine. So it's not like one's better than the other. They really need to be complementary. They work together. And I think that's what I really like about homeopathy is because it's about restoring balance, it kind of also is about restoring women back into their more feminine essence, but also having that side of masculinity to them as well, but in a healthy way. So that's, yeah, I don't know if that explains it enough, but that's kind of how I've been working a little bit more.
Oh yeah, so true. It's so important. And balance is the key to everything. My father would say that when we were younger, and I didn't really understand it until I got older. And I'm still working on achieving that balance myself because it's a challenge, right? But it's so
Yeah.
important. And I think women being in that hustle culture, go, go, go all the time, their nervous systems get very just overstressed and overburdened much faster than men, I think, as I don't think that's what our role is meant to be. We're meant to be the nurturing and the loving and the caring and we're meant to
Mm.
take, we're meant to take care. Like that's been our role. Like, I don't know, that's my thoughts. And I feel like we're doing so much. I mean, I know part of the reason why one, like just to bring my own story in, part of the reason why I got sick was overdoing life. Like really, that was really a huge part of it. And I was a special ed teacher, but I had three kids, had the house, the laundry, the cleaning, the cooking, like everything done, like just doing everything and getting and working out all the time and like trying to take care of my own stuff and trying to find time to meditate and do yoga. Like I was, you would think I was real healthy, but I just was never stopping. Like I just the amount of things that I was trying, the balls I was trying to juggle. I mean, you're gonna have a crash, you're gonna have burnout. My adrenals are still recovering, let's be honest. Like, and it's been what, 5, 6 years. So, it's a thing. We're not meant to just do so many roles and have all of that. Like it's just a lot.
That's essentially what happens to women. They burn out if they're too
Oh
much
yeah.
masculine, and the
Yeah.
adrenal energy. Yes. I mean, if anything, like of any organ supports that I give the most, probably adrenal support is
I was
is
gonna
the
say
most popular.
adrenal, liver, thyroid. Those I think are
Yeah.
really, really valuable. I really like the polyorgan. I've been using that more and more. Polyorgan Plus, you probably know that remedy. It's a
Yes,
really
I just
nice.
heard about that. It sounds really, yeah, it sounds fantastic.
I think
Really
it was Ren Lloyd who came up with that one, but it's very interesting because it helps open up detox pathways, but it also gives all the organs like a lot of good nourishment and energetic support. And
yeah.
it's one I'll start with before like doing a detox. Like start with that first, so everything's pathways are opened and the organs are just got a little bit of energetic boost. So they're like, all right, we can do this. We got this, before they get into it, which, it's a good strategy.
Just reminding the body what it's like to be in balance. That's as
Right.
simple as it gets, right? It's just this is how
Totally.
the adrenals in a balanced state would be. This is how the pancreas in a balanced state would be. And it's just like
Yeah.
that's essentially what we're always striving towards is balance. And I think, yeah, but that's a big part of learning about ourselves, isn't it? Is understanding ourselves and evolving. I think, I didn't really think about my I mean, I fell into the masculine energy massively because my husband was very unwell 2.5 years ago. And, that
Mm.
was me then being like, oh, I have to look after the house and do all the cooking and also work and I have to find a way to earn more money. And it's like, it's not sustainable in the long term for me anyway. It's
I don't
just,
think it's for most of us it's sustainable in
uh,
any way. It's just too much. Yeah, it's too much for our bodies to handle. And it's like, well, that's why we all need a good homeopath on our team to like support us and know like what to do and how to navigate it, right?
having more trust, allowing things to flow to us, allowing us to have intuition, and all of these feminine aspects are just so amazing and so powerful. But we've kind of put them into a category of woo, or kind of they're not, important enough. But of course, we need all of it. I mean, I just look for signs all the time, even just silly things like we bought a car recently because ours got written off sadly. And so I was like, there's so many cars. Which one do we choose? And because they're used cars, they're all got different mileage and this and that. And I was like, we just need a sign. And I remember seeing a friend and I bumped into her in the park, in a park that neither of us really go to. And her daughter and her were walking back to the car because they had to get something. And I saw her car and I was like, oh, that's the car we've been looking at. And it's the same color and everything. And
Wow.
then later, when we went to buy a car, I was like, we're just going to look for that car because I feel like that's the sign. And then when we found the car, my initials are in the number plate.
Oh my
I was like,
goodness.
okay.
That's
That might
perfect.
be a good sign. Yeah.
I was like, there we go. And then we just bought it off the back of literally those. I mean, my husband was like, oh, it's like eye roll, like signs.
Those are
Right.
like the best things though. Like I feel like when we like do those things, like kind of we just look for those synchronicities, we look for those kind of signs in our environment. That's the same thing when we bought our dog Teddy. We were just driving home, like my kids were like, "We want a dog," and I was like, "Really?" Like, maybe I don't know. Our other dog had passed a couple of years before, and I was like, maybe, all right." And then we just kind of like kept looking around, and I was like, "We just bought him on the way home, like in spur of the moment." We stopped at like a couple places, and we just bought a dog like on the way home from a camping trip, and it was like he's the best dog ever, and he was meant to be like. And I intuitively he came to me, and I felt like he just, I don't know, like it's just that's the best
It's
way when
a
things happen
it's
like
a
that.
way of receiving things, isn't it? Just
Yeah,
like rather than
exactly.
searching and pushing and all of that stuff that we get caught up in. Like that's the only way the world works is to push and make
Mhm.
people do things. And again with
Yeah.
homeopathy, like pushing the body to remove a symptom, you can't do that with remedies because remedies are about balance.
Hmm.
So the body will only
Well,
do what it's prepared to do at that time. And sometimes
there you
if you
go.
don't listen to what the body's saying, then the remedies won't do what their job was meant to be, or what you hoped it was
Right.
going to be.
Yeah.
So you have to
Right. The
really
body
pay
can only do what
attention.
it's ready for. Yeah. I love that. That's such a good knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, to
Yeah.
be astute and to pay attention and to, I mean, I think that we also have to be in touch with our experience of ourselves and the client and the patient or the client so that we can then tune into what it is they're needing, similarly
Yeah.
to what you guys are just talking about. So, Claire, I'm wanting to know like what areas are lighting you up right now that you're studying, and then where do you see the future of your practice going? Like, where do you want to go now?
I know I'm in that phase at the moment where I've been working in a very particular way, like seeing clients one to one, and that's just how I work. And obviously now with the world of online and courses and all of these different things, I've actually that was another thing I was trying to do was like draw in new experiences, but I didn't know where to start. And Lisa Straback very kindly was like, "Please, will you be a guest lecturer on my new course?" And I was like, "Oh my goodness." But then I thought, yeah, I can do it. I actually did something called the Landmark Forum maybe a year ago. So, and it was something that my dad was very keen on doing. He's been talking about it to me for literally years. And I thought, okay, I'll go and do it. And I think the biggest takeaway I got from that was that it was about saying yes to opportunity and like turning off the noise of my brain going, oh, but I can't do that. And I don't know what I'm talking about. And I was like, no, I can do it. Yes, I'm going to do it. And just opening myself up to possibilities. So I did that. And then I also started a new supervision group with some students. And I've really enjoyed that because I've done kind of odd one-to-ones here and there. But this was,
Mm,
yeah, this is a group. Then we meet every couple of weeks. And
mm,
that's been really great just from the perspective also from my learning as well, hearing new cases and hearing different types of prescribing, and they use different potencies that I would use. And I think that's the nice collaborative thing about working with students is that you still on your journey of learning. I don't know what I'll do going forward. I've got ideas, but yeah, at the moment I'm still kind of structured the way I've always been with my one-to-one work, which I think is still really important because I think there's a lot of people now doing so much group work, and I think you can get kind of fatigued with working in groups. And I think with homeopathy as well, such an individualized medicine, I'm not sure you could ever really get the results you would want unless you're working with someone literally one to one. So that's kind of where I just feel like that's where my skill set lies. So I'm kind of enjoying that at the
yeah.
moment. But
I
yeah,
agree. I agree. We really need the one-to-one support for people. I can't imagine doing group homeopathy sessions. I don't know how that would actually flow for me. It would be way too confusing. And people don't maybe want to share things in a group that they would have individually. So I'm not really sure how that would go either. But I love what you said about how you're teaching, working with the students and that you're learning from them too, because I think one of the most important things in being a homeopath and probably any job that you do, but especially in homeopathy is we can get like stuck in our own island, right? Because we're at home, we're working from Zoom, you're not in with people, right? You're not with other homeopaths, and then you're not like expanding and evolving and like hearing other things and different ways
yeah,
of working and things like that. So I think staying in contact as a homeopath with other homeopaths is so valid and so important. And there is just like there's never ending learning in homeopathy, like we said before, with different methods, different remedies that come out. And it's not that we need to know more, but it just might come into your field when it's needed. Right? Like I just learned about the remedy bamboo, which I had never heard about before. And
I
I was
love
like,
that.
oh, this is such, I just ordered it. I ordered it for my husband because he's very responsible and very duty bound and he gets back eggs a lot. And I was like, oh, I never knew about that one. So it might be like a good one to try with him when the situation comes up again.
Yeah,
So it's just it comes into your field when I feel like it's needed, right?
yeah.
So I feel like when we stay connected with each other,
Mhm.
we'll just continue to just be better at our profession, We used to be like that in the past, right? We used to work together in homeopathic hospitals, and now that's not an option. So maybe it will be one day again, but yeah.
And I still get the occasional supervision if I get very stuck with a case and I
Yeah.
think I need a second pair of eyes, because I don't have a colleague to like just reflect on. I mean, I would love that. I would love to work with somebody else in a collaborative way, but nowadays it's just harder to do that. But yeah, the idea that sometimes you just need a fresh pair of eyes. And often it's something I already knew, but it's like you need that reassurance of, yes, you're on the right path, and oh, what about looking at this and that? And I just think it's just you're always learning. And I think also working with students is quite nice because you realize how far you've come. So in terms of like practice building, all the things I've tried over the years, I'm not saying I'm an expert in everything, but there are definitely things that I think are what more like worked better for me than other things, and helping
Mm,
lead them on that path. And I think the resurgence in homeopathy is so great because I think
mm,
it's going to be a lot easier for them to build a practice in this day and age because there's never going to be an end of sick people to work with. And, we are
unfortunately.
needed. I mean, it's only getting worse. And so people are
Yeah.
desperate. They're looking for other options. They're not getting those options from their doctor, unfortunately, so they
Mm.
are thinking outside of the field more. I mean, even just at my fitness class recently, there was a woman talking about her daughter really struggling with eczema that's much worse for swimming. She swims regularly. And I said, why don't you just order some chlorine 6C from Helios and yeah, and just see if it helps. It's not a consultation, but it's just there's an obvious chemical that she's coming into contact with that's aggravating her. And this is someone who knows nothing about homeopathy, but she went and ordered it and she's like, okay, we've got it, we're going to try it. And I
Wow.
just think that there's more openness, like people are definitely like listening. While
Yeah.
before they might have been a bit like, oh, well, I don't know what that is, and I'll need to check with my doctor. And while now people are more
I get
like,
that.
okay, I need to, even if it's just supplements, like, oh, maybe I need to get some magnesium. And obviously, you can have extremes in wellness too, as we know from social media. Like there are the full-on biohackers who will do everything known to man that often for many people is not accessible. And there's going to be extremes within the wellness industry too. And I think again, it's like homeopathy for me, it's like a refreshing voice of
Mm,
balance because you're working with nature, not against it.
I love
You don't
that.
need lots of fancy tools. You just need a few remedies, a little kit to get you started.
You
So
could do
yeah.
so much with a little kid. That chlorine story, I love that one. And I do think, I definitely see both. I feel people are more interested and more receptive, but I definitely think when people sometimes they'll book in with me and they're like, they don't even know what homeopathy is. They think it's like they're going to get supplements or herbs or things like that. And then I kind of have to explain. And that chlorine story was so interesting too, because I'll just share with the listeners and you, my boys, we have a pool here, above ground pool in our home, and they would get rashes. And I mean, I grew up very conventional, like I didn't know any about anything, right? So they would get rashes, and we had switched to salt water, and the rashes went away. I was like, so it was obviously from the chemicals, and the body was trying to like, oh, let's push this chlorine out. We don't want it, so the body was trying to get rid of it. So yeah, it's just so interesting to hear that story. And I hope that that remedy worked really well for her. And just like
Oh
people
yeah.
do saltwater pools. We might have the recommendation if we
That's the
can.
difficulty, isn't it? It's like the saltwater pools in a public pool. Like when
Yeah,
am I
but that might be a little bit more challenging, actually. That's true. That's a good point.
to see what happens?
Yeah. Well, this has been so fun, Claire. Anything you want to close out with? Anything that you didn't get to share that you were like, oh, I really wanted to mention this and we didn't get to touch on it?
I don't think so. No, I think we spoke about a lot. I think for anyone who's looking to get started in homeopathy, just get a very simple kit and use a little booklet and try it out on your friends and family and don't have any fear, I think is the biggest takeaway for me. I think there's a lot of fear around taking the remedies at the right time and without the, peppermint toothpaste. And it's like I drink coffee, I have peppermint toothpaste. I often just chuck a remedy and chew it straight away, and it still works. So I just think that was the biggest takeaway from college for me was like, don't have fear around the remedies. They are so powerful. They're not going to just dissolve into nothingness because you had a sip of coffee. So that's my little snippet.
I love that's very
Mm.
liberating because fear is a problem. And so I love how
Mhm.
that your training was like, don't even worry about it, just take the remedies.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Mhm.
Well,
That's
Claire,
Mhm.
good.
thank you so, so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, tell us listeners where they can find you.
Yeah, so I'm mostly on Instagram. I'm Claire underscore homeopath. And I also have a website, which is clairesarb.com. But yeah, you can catch me on email or Instagram, and hope to connect with people soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Claire.
Thank you.